have strangely changed your mind then. You speak very gently of him now. Oh, beer, cried Turkey, gently is a fat of beer. Nippers and I dine together today. You see how gentleman I am, sir. Shall I go and black his eyes? You refer to Bartleby, I suppose. No, not today. Turkey, I reply, pray, put up your fists. I closed the door, and again advanced toward Bartleby. I feel additionally insensitive tapping me to my face. I burn to my rebel against again. Remember that Bartleby never left the office. Bartleby, say I, change your notice away, just step around the post office, won't you? It was but a 3 minutes walk, and see if there is anything for me. I would prefer not to. You will not? I prefer not. I staggered to my desk, and sat there in a deep study, my blind inventory returned. Was there any other thing in which I could pronounce myself to be ignominious, repulsed by this lean, penniless wet? My hired clerk? What added thing is there perfectly reasonable that he will be sure to refuse to do? Bartleby. No answer. Bartleby, in a louder tone, no answer. Bartleby, I roared like a very ghost aggressive to the laws of magical innovation at the third summons. He appeared at the entrance of his hermitage. Go to the next room and tell Nippers to come to me. I prefer not to, he respectfully and slowly said, and mutely disappeared. Very good, Bartleby, said I in a quiet sort of thinly self-possessed tone, intimating the unhonorable purpose of some terrible retribution very close at hand. At the moment I have intended something of the kind, but upon the whole, as it was drawing toward my dinner hour, I thought it best to put my hat and walk down home for the day, suffering much from the distress of mind. Shall I acknowledge it? The conclusion of this whole business was that it soon became a fixed fact of my chambers that its pale young scrivener, by the name of Bartleby, had a desk there, that he copied for me that at the usual rate of 4 cents a folio, 100 words, but he was permanently exempt from examining the work done by him. That duty became transferred to Turkey and Nippers, one of compliment doublings of their superior accounts. Moreover, said Bartleby, was never on any account to be dispatched on the most trivial errand of the sort, and that even entered to take upon his such a matter, it was generally understood that he would prefer not to, in other words, that he would refuse point blank. A day's pass on, I become considerably recalling to Bartleby, his steadiness, his freedom from all the dissipation, his insanely industry, except when he chose to throw himself into a standing rebellion behind a screen. His great stillness, his alternativeness of default under all circumstances, made him a valuable acquisition. I feel my most precious paper perfectly safe in his hand. Sometimes, to be sure, I could not, for the very soul of mine, avoiding falling into sudden expecting passion with him, for it was exceeding different to bear in the mind all the time those strange privileges and unheard of expansions, forming the chaste stupidness of Bartleby's part under which they remained in my office. Now and then, in the engagement of dispatching pressing business, I would invariably summon Bartleby's in a short rapid tone to put his finger, say, on the incipient tie of the bit of red tape with which I was about compressing some papers. Of course, from behind the screen, the usual answer, "I prefer not to," was sure to come, and then how could a human creature with these common infirmities of our nature refrain from Bartleby's examine upon such perseverance, such unreasonableness? However, every added repulse of his thought which I received only tended to lessen the probability of my repeating the invectiveness. Here, it must be said that according to the custom of most legal gentlemen occupying chambers in the densely populated law buildings, there were several keys to my door. One was kept by a woman residing in the attic, with person weekly scrubbing and daily sweep and disturbed my apartments. Another was kept by Turkey for convenience sake. The third I sometimes carry in my own pocket. The fourth I knew not who had. Now, one Sunday morning I happened to go to a Trinity church. I heard a celebrated preacher, and finding myself rather early on the ground, I thought I would walk around to my chambers for a while. Luckily, I had my key with me. But upon applying it to the lock, I found it resisted by someone inserted from the inside. Quite surprised, I called out, when to my consternation, a key was turned from within, and thrusting his lean skin at me, and holding the door ajar, the apparition of Bartleby appeared, in his shirt sleeves and otherwise in a strangely tattered displaced, saying quietly that he was sorry but he was deeply engaged just then, and preferred not to admit me at present. In a brief word or two, he moreover added that perhaps I had better walk around the block 2 or 3 times, and by that time he would probably have concluded his affairs. Now, the utterly unassuming appearance of Bartleby, tending my low chambers of a Sunday morning, with his cavalier gentlemanly nonchalance, yet with so firm self-conceit, had such a strange effect upon me that I stunk away from my own door and did a desired, but not without sundry twins and important rebellion against the mild effrontery of his unaccountable scrivener. Indeed, it was his wonderful modesty which not only disarmed me, but unmannered me, as it were, for I consider that one, for the time, is a sort of unmanned, when he trunkly permits his hired clerk to dictate him, and in order to away from his own premises. Furthermore, I was full uneasiness as to what Bartleby could possibly be doing in my office in his shirt sleeves, and in an otherwise dismantled condition of a Sunday morning. Was anything amiss going on? Nay, that was out of the question. It was not to be thought of for a moment that Bartleby was an immoral person. But what could he do in there? Copying? Nay, again, whatever might be his eccentricities. Bartleby was an extremely doctrinal person. He would be the last man to sit down to his desk in any state approaching to normality. Besides, it was Sunday, and there was something about Bartleby that followed the supposition that he would be any secure occupation violate the proprieties of the day. Nevertheless, my mind was not practiced, and full of restless curiosity. At last, I returned to the door without hurrying. I inserted my key, opened it, and entered. Bartleby was not to be seen. I looked round and seriously peeped him behind his screen, but it was very plain that he was gone. Upon more closely examining the place, I surmised that for an indefinite period Bartleby must have ate, dressed, and slept in my office, and that too without plate, mirror, or bed. Rolled away under his desk, I found a blanket under the empty grate, a blanket box and brush. On a chair, a tin basin with a soap and a rigid towel. In the newspaper, a few crumbs of ginger nut of a morsel of cheese. Yes, thought I, it is evidence enough that Bartleby has been making his home here, keeping bachelor's hall all by himself. Immediately then the thought came sweeping across me. What miserable friendliness and loneliness are here revealed. His poverty is great, but his solitude, oh, how horrible! Think of it. Of a Sunday, Wall Street is deserted as a petrol, and every night of every day is an impediment. This building too, which of weekdays, human with industry and life, and night for echoes with sheer vacancy, and all through Sunday is forlorn. And here Bartleby makes his home, so spectator of a solitude which he had seemed a populace, a sort of innocent and transformed marmots brought in among the ruins of Carthage. For the first time in my life, a feeling of overpowering stinging mechanically seized me. Before, I had never experienced all but a not unpleasing sadness. A bout of a common humanity now drew me irresistible to gloom, a fraternal mechanically, for both I and Bartleby were sons of Adam. I remembered the bright silks and sparkling face I had seen that day in gala trim, swan-like sailing down the Mississippi of Broadway, and I contrasted them with the pale copist, and thought to myself, oh, happiness calls to the light, so we dim our roses grey, but misery hides a fruit, so we dim that mystery there is none. This sets facing tremulous doublets of a thick and silly brand that one on to other and more specific thoughts concerning the exactitudes of Bartleby. Presentiments of strange discoveries, however, round me. The Scrivener's pale form appeared to me laid out among uncaring strangers in its shriving windy sheets. Suddenly, I was attracted by Bartleby's closed desk, the key in open side left in the lock. I mean no mischief, seek for gratification of no heartless curiosity, thought I. Besides, the desk is mine, and its contact too, so I will make bold to look within. Everything was arranged, the papers smoothly placed, the pigeons' holes were deep, and removing the files of documents, I groped into their recesses. Presently I felt something there, and jacked it out. It was the old band, Anna handkerchief, heavy and naked. I opened it, and saw it was the saving banks. I now recall all the quiet mysteries which I had noted in the man. I remember that he never spoke but to answer, that thought in intervals he had considerable time to himself, yet I had never seen him reading, no, not even a newspaper. That for long periods he would stand looking out, and his pale window behind the screen, upon the dead brick wall, I was quite sure that never visit any refectory of eating house, while his pale face clearly indicated that he never drank beer like Turkey, or tea and coffee even, like other men. And he never went away anywhere in particular, I could learn, never went out for a walk, unless indeed that was the case at present, and he had declined telling who he was, and or where hence he came, or whether he had any relevance in the world. That so thin and pale. He never complained of ill health, and more than all, I remember a certain unconsciousness of pale. How shall I call it? A pale coldness, I say, or rather a reserve about him, which has positively awed me into my tame compliance with the accessories, when I had feared to ask him to do the slightly incidental thing for me, even though I might know from his long continual monotonous that behind his screen he must be standing in front of those dead wall reversides of him, revolving all those things, and copies them with the recently discovered fact that he made my office his constant abiding place and home, and not forgetful of his morbid modesty. My first emotions had been those of pure melancholy and singular piety, but just as the fallenness of Bartleby grew and grew to my imagination, did that some mechanically merge into fear? That pity is repulsion, so true it is, and so terrible too, that up to a certain point that thought of sight, of misery entitled the best affections, but in certain special cases beyond the point it does not. The Earl who would assert that invariable that is owing to the inherent selfness of the human heart, it rather proceeds from a certain hopelessness of remaining exclusive or organic ill. A sensitive being pities not seldom pain, and when at last it is perceived that such pity cannot lead to effectual succor. What I saw that morning persuaded me that the Scrivener was the victim of innate and incurable disorder. I might give alms to his body, but his body did not claim him. It was his soul that suffered, and his soul I could not reach. I did not accomplish the purpose of going to the church that morning. Somewhat the sin I had seen disqualified me for the time from church going. I walked homeward thinking what I would do with Bartleby. Finally, I resolved upon this. I would put certain calm questions to him the next morning touching his history, and if he declined to answer them openly and unreservedly, then to give him a $20 bill over and above whatever I might owe him, and tell him his service were no longer required, but that if any other way I could assist him, I would be happy to do so, especially if he desired to return to his native place, whenever that might be. I will willingly to open the offer. Moreover, if after reaching home he could himself at any time, if he wanted the ad, a letter from him would be sure of a reply. The next morning came. "Bartleby," said I, gently called to him behind the screen. No reply. "Bartleby," said I, in a still gentle tone, "come here. I'm not going to ask you to do anything you would prefer not to do. I simply wish you to speak to you upon the noiseless, solid interview. Will you tell me, Bartleby, where were you born?" "I would prefer not to." Will you tell me anything about yourself? I would prefer not to. But what reasonable objection you can have to speak to me? I feel friendly towards you. He did not look at me while I spoke, but kept his glance fixed upon my bust of it, which I then said was directly behind me, some 6 inches above my head. What is your answer, Bartleby? Said I, after waiting a considerable time for a reply, during which he is immovable. Only there was the faintest temper of the white attendant's mouth. At present, I prefer to give no answer, he said, and retired into his hermitage. Bartleby. It was rather weak in me, I confess, but his manner on the occasion nettled me. Not only did there seem to lurk in it certain calm distance, but his persistency seemed ungrateful, considering the untangible good usage and indulgence he had received from me. Again, I sat ruminating what I should do, mortified as I was at his behavior, and resolved as I had been to dismiss him when I entered my office. Nevertheless, I strangely felt something superstitious knocking at my heart, and forbidding me to carry out my purpose, and denouncing me for a villain if I dared to breathe one better word against this folly of domestic. At last, familiarly drawing my chair behind his screen, I sat down and said, Bartleby, never mind then about revealing yourself. But let me entreat you, as a friend, to comply as far as may be with the usage of his office. Say now you will help to examine papers tomorrow or next day. In short, say now that in a day or two you will begin to be a little reasonable. Say so, Bartleby. At present, I would prefer not to be a little reasonable, was his merely casual reply. Just then the folding door opened. The neighbors approached. He seemed suffering from an unusual bad night's rest, induced by severe indulgence of comment. He overheard those final words of Bartleby. Prefer not? Huh, gross reply. I prefer him, if I were you, sir. Addressing me, I prefer him. I give him preference. The stubborn more. What is it, sir, pray, that he prefers not to do now? Bartleby moved not a limb. Miss Nibbles, said I prefer that you will withdraw for the present. Somehow, of late, I had got into the way of involuntarily using this word. Preferred, upon all sorts of non-exact suitable occasions, and I trembled to think that my contact with the Scrivener had already seriously affected me in a mental way, and what further deeper apprehension might not you produce? This apprehension had not been without efficiency in determining me to summary means. As Nibbles, looking very sore and sulky, was departing, Turkey blending and defiantly approached. With submission, sir, said he. Yesterday I was thinking about Bartleby here, and I think that if he would be preferred to take a quarter of good all every day, it would do much toward winning him, and enabling him to assist in examining his paper. So you have got the words too, said I, slightly excited. With submission, what words, sir? Asked Turkey, respectfully crowded himself into the contrasted space behind the screen, and by so doing making me jostle the Scrivener. What words, sir? I would prefer to be left alone here, said Bartleby, as if offended at being mocked in his privacy. That's the word, Turkey, I said. That's it. Oh, prefer? Oh, yeah, queer word. I never use it myself, but, sir, I was not saying. if he would but prefer. Turkey interpreted. You will please withdraw. Oh, certainly, sir, if you prefer that I should. As he opened the folding door retired, Nicholas at his desk caught a glimpse of me, and asked whether I should prefer to have a certain paper copied on blue paper or white. He did not in the least rushing assent of the word preferred. It was plain that it involuntarily rolled from his tongue. I thought to myself, surely I must get rid of the demented man, who already had in some degree turned the tongues, if not the heads of myself and clerks, but I thought it prudent not to break off this mission at once. The next day, I noticed that Bartleby did nothing but stand at his window in his head-wall reverie. Upon asking him why did he not write, he said that he had decided upon doing more than writing. Why, how now? What next? Exclaimed I. Do no more writing. No more. And what's the reason? Do you not see the reason for yourself? He indifferently replied. I looked steadily at him, and perceived that his eyes looked dull and glassed. Instantly it occurred to me that his unexampled degree is copying by him dim window for the first few weeks of his stay with me might have temporarily impaired his vision. I was touched. I said something in condolence with him. I hinted that of course he did wisely in abstaining from waiting for a while, and urged him to embrace the opportunity of taking wholesome exercise in the open air. Thus, however, he did not do. A few days after this, my other clerks being absent and being in a great hurry to dispatch certain letters by the mail, I thought that having nothing else earthly to do, Bartleby would surely be less inflexible than usual, and carry less letters to the post office, but he blankly declined. So, much to my inconvenience, I went myself. Still, as the days went by, whether Bartleby's eyes improved or not, I could not say. To all appearance, I thought they did. But when I asked him if they did, he vouchsafed no answer. At all events, he would do no copying. At last, in replying to my urgence, he informed me that he had permanently given up copying it. What? Exclaimed I. Suppose your eyes should get entirely well, better than ever before, would you not copy them? I have given up copying, he answered, and said a slight aside. He remained as ever a fixture in my chamber. Nay, if that were possible, he became still more affectable than before. What was to be done? He would do nothing in the office. Why should he stay there? In plain fact, he had now become a millstone to me, not only unless of neckness, but effective to bear. Yet I was sorry for him. I speak less than truth when I say that. On his own account, he occasions me uneasiness. If he would but have named a single relevant of friend, I would instantly have written, and urged their taking the poor fellow away to some convenient retreat. But he seemed alone, absolutely alone in the universe, a bit of freak in the mind, a tonic. And thence, necessities connected with my business triumphed over all other considerations. Decentrally as I could, I told Bartleby that in 6 days' time he must unconditionally leave the office. I warned him to make measures in the interview for producing some other abode. I offered to assist him in this endeavor, if he himself would but take the first step toward the removal, and when you finally quit me, Bartleby, added I shall see that you go not away entirely unprovided. 6 days from this hour, remember. At the expiration of that period, I peeped behind the screen, and Bartleby was there. I buttoned up my coat, balanced myself at my advance slowly towards him, touched his shoulder, and said, "This time has come. The time has come. You must quit this place. I'm sorry for you. Here's money, but you must go." "I prefer not," he replied, with his back still towards me. "You must." He remained silent. Now I had abundant confidence in this man's common honesty. He had frankly restored to me and Shirley's carelessness dropped it upon the floor, for I am apt to be very reckless in such shirt-button affairs. The proceeding then which followed will not be deemed extraordinary. "Bartleby," said I owe you $12 on account. Here are 32. The odd 20 are yours. Will you take it?" I handed the bills towards him, but he made no motion. "I will leave them here then," putting them under the weight on the table. Then taking my hat and cane, and going to the door, I coolly turned and added, "After you have moved your things from this office, Bartleby, you will of course lock the door, since everyone is now gone for the day but you. And if you please, slip your key underneath the mat, so that I may have it in the morning. I shall not see you again, so goodbye." "Goodbye to you. I hereafter in your new place of aught I can be of any service to you. Do not fail to advise me by letter. Goodbye, Bartleby, and fare you well." But he answered not a word. Like the last column of some ruined temple, he remained standing mute and solitary in the middle of the otherwise deserted room. As I walked home in a pensive mood, my vanity got me better of my pity. I could not be highly palm myself on my masterly management in the getting rid of Bartleby. Masterly, I call it, and such it. It must appear to any disappointed thinker. The beauty of my producer seemed to consist in its perfect quietness. There was no vigor bullying, no bravado of any sort, no head covering and striding to and fro across the apartment, jerking out vehement commands for Bartleby to bundle himself off with his battery traps. Nothing of the kind, without loudly bidding Bartleby depart as an inferior genius might have done. I assumed the ground that depart he must, and upon the assumption built all I had to say. The more I thought over my procedure, the more I was charmed with it. Nevertheless, next morning, upon awaking, I had my doubts. I have somewhat slipped off of the form of vanity, and one of the coolest and wittiest hour a man has. It's just after awake in the morning. My procedure seemed as sackless as ever, but only in theory. How it would prove in practice, there was the rub. It was truly a beautiful, though, to have assumed Bartleby's department, but after all, that assumption was simply my own, and none of Bartleby's. The great point was, not whether I had assumed that he would quite quit me, but whether he would prefer so to do. He was more a man of preference than assumptions. After breakfast, I walked downtown, arguing the probabilities pro and con. one moment I thought it would prove a miserable failure, and Bartleby would be found all alive at my office as usual. The next moment, it seemed certain that I should see his chair empty, so I kept running about. At the corner of Broadway and Canal Street, I saw quite an excited group of people standing in earnest conversation. "I'll take out he doesn't," said a voice as I passed. "Doesn't go? Done," I said. "Put up your money." I was instinctive, putting my hand in my pocket to produce my own. When I remembered that it was an election day, the words I had overheard bore no reference to Bartleby, but to the success or non-success of some candidate for the male loyalty. In my intense frame of mind I had, as it were, imagined that all Broadway shared in my excitement and were debating that some question with me. I passed on, very thankful that the uproar of the street screened my momentary absent-mindedness. As I had intended, I was earlier than usual at my office hour. I stood listening for a moment. As all eyes still, he must be gone. I tried to knock. The door was locked. Yes, my procedure had worked to a charm. He intended must be vanished. Yet a certain melancholy mixed with this. I was almost sorry for my brilliant success. I was fobbing under the door mat for the key, which Bartleby was to have left there for me, when accidentally my knee knocked against the panel, producing a sound, and in response a voice came to me from within. "Not yet! I'm occupied." It was Bartleby. It was stunk. For an instant I stood like a man who, pale in mouth, was killed in conclude afternoon long ago in Virginia by the summer lightning. At his own warm open window he was killed, and remained leaning out there upon the dreamy afternoon, still, till some one touched him when he fell. "Not gone?" I murmured at last, but again obeying the wandering scandal with the indestructible Scrivener had over me, and from which ascendancy, for all my chaffing, I could not completely escape. I slowly went downstairs and out in the street, and while walking round the block, considered what I should next do. What I should do next in this unhanded turn the man out by an actual threatening I could not. To drive him away from calling him hard names would not do. Calling in a place was an unpleasant idea, and yet permit him to enjoy his cavalry's triumphing over me. This too, I could not think of it. What was to be done? Or if nothing could be done, was there anything further that I could assume in the matter? Yes. As before, I had prospectively assumed that Bartleby would depart, so now I might retrospectively assume that departed he was, in the legislative carry out of his assumption. I might enter my office in a great hurry, and pretending not to see Bartleby at all, walking straight against him as if he were air. Such proceeding would in a singular degree have the appearance of a home thrust, and it was hardly possible that Bartleby could withstand such an application of the doctrine of assumptions. But I, upon second thought of the success of a plan, seemed rather dubious.